You saved, you planned, you walked into that dealership thinking you were buying freedom. What you really got: lies, markups, and a loan you'll regret for years. Motorcycle buyers are done being played. And now, the same industry that scammed them is collapsing under its own weight. The price explosion nobody saw coming. After the pandemic, motorcycle dealerships didn't just raise prices, they detonated them. What started as a supply chain issue morphed into full-blown financial sabotage. Riders across the country watched as the motorcycles they once could afford turned into luxury items overnight. And it wasn't just about parts or global shortages, it was about control. Dealers cited every excuse in the book: microchip shortages, shipping delays, labor costs. But behind closed doors, something more cynical was happening. Supply was being strangled on purpose. Dealers wanted fewer bikes on showroom floors because that meant more power over the buyer. And they got exactly what they wanted. With fewer units coming in, they began rewriting the price tags. Manufacturers suggested retail price used to be a standard, a baseline. But post-pandemic, it became a joke. Dealers started slapping on market adjustments as if that was a normal part of buying a motorcycle. A $10,000 bike, now $12,000. A $17,000 cruiser, suddenly $21,000. And that didn't even include destination fees, prep charges, and dealer-installed add-ons. But then, buyers stopped showing up. The hype wore off. Riders ran out of patience and out of money. Inventory started piling up again, and suddenly, dealerships had too many bikes and not enough wallets to match them. But overpriced bikes were just the beginning. The real damage came after you signed. The motorcycle loan trap. If the sticker shock wasn't enough, dealerships had another trick up their sleeve: financing. It used to be that a motorcycle loan was a short-term commitment. 2 to 3 years, a manageable interest rate, and you were done. But that era is long gone. Today, buyers are being pushed into 5, 6, even 7-year loans just to afford the monthly payments. But those smaller payments come at a steep cost. Because interest rates have soared, stretching the loan term only buries the buyer deeper. What starts as a $20,000 motorcycle ends up costing $35,000 or more over the life of the loan. Add in fees, accessories, and inflated insurance premiums, and you're looking at a machine that costs as much as a new car with none of the practicality. And here's the emotional toll. These bikes aren't daily drivers. They're passion machines. Most people don't commute on a Harley or a Ninja. These bikes are for joy, for freedom, for the weekend ride. But when you're shelling out $500 a month for 7 years, that joy turns into obligation. Riders begin skipping rides. Even worse, dealerships prey on buyers with low credit. They offer high-interest loans with terrible terms, knowing those customers are the least likely to understand the fine print. Riders are told they're approved, then handed paperwork with interest rates over 10 or even 15%. Many don't even realize the trap until the payments begin. And if a buyer tries to walk away, that's when the hidden tricks come out. Early payoff penalties, repossession threats, and negative equity that sticks them with debt long after the bike is gone. And then came the tricks that made you pay, even when you walked away. Hidden fees, fake scarcity, forced add-ons. By now, riders were already paying too much and locking into brutal loans. But that wasn't enough for some dealerships. So they reached for their favorite tool of all, manipulation. And they used it to squeeze every last dime out of buyers who were already stretched to the limit. It starts the moment you walk in. You see a $15,000 bike on the floor. Maybe it's the one you researched, the one you dreamed about. But when you sit down to talk numbers, it transforms. Suddenly, the final price is $23,000. Why? Because of destination charges, prep fees, paint protection, documentation handling, and don't forget the mandatory extended warranty and the special theft tracking system. None of this was optional. You want the bike, you buy the package. Worse yet, they'll tell you the model is rare. This is the last one in the state. Someone else is looking at it today. They build a false sense of urgency to close the deal. But in the back of the lot, 5 more just like it gathering dust. Dealerships weaponize scarcity even as their warehouses overflowed. Trade-in scams were rampant too. Bring in a well-maintained used bike and you're told it's worth almost nothing. But that same dealership will list it online the next week for top dollar. Buyers feel trapped, insulted. But by then, many have already sunk too much time and energy into the purchase. They sign anyway. It was never about the bike. It was about draining every dollar from your wallet and making you think it was your idea. And just when riders were ready to quit, something flipped. No hype, no fluff, just the truth about what really happened in those showrooms. Like and subscribe if you want more reporting that puts riders first. Riders fight back. The first signs of rebellion. It started small. One buyer walked away from a bloated deal, another skipped the showroom entirely and bought used. But then it grew. Forums lit up with stories of ripoffs. Social media became a war zone of receipts and invoice breakdowns. The message was clear. Enough is enough. Riders began organizing, not with protests but with silence. They stopped showing up. Showroom floors that once turned over bikes every weekend became ghost towns. Inventory that used to sell out in days sat for months. Salespeople, once aggressive and smug, started whispering words you hadn't heard in years. We can talk about a discount. Meanwhile, the used market exploded. Riders realized that a 5-year-old bike with 10,000 miles could deliver the same thrill without the dealership drama. Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and private sellers became the new motorcycle showrooms. No fees, no financing traps, just a machine and a handshake. Even more telling, some riders quit the hobby altogether. The costs, the games, the stress, it was too much. What used to be freedom had turned into a hustle, a betrayal, and people were done. Dealers are now sitting on unsold inventory. Discounts are quietly creeping back. Financing incentives are reappearing. The game has changed. But even as prices started dropping, something even bigger was breaking. A trust that may never fully be repaired. New bikes. No one wants. The future arrived, but nobody asked for it. Modern motorcycles, once a symbol of raw freedom and stripped-down mechanics, have now been transformed into rolling computers. At least that's how many lifelong riders describe them. Touchscreens, ride modes, adaptive cruise control, electronic suspension, and complex software updates were supposed to usher in a new era. Instead, they alienated the very people who once kept this industry alive. It started subtly. Brands introduced tech that sounded useful, but somewhere along the line, motorcycles stopped feeling like motorcycles. Riders didn't want Bluetooth headsets embedded in fairings. They didn't ask for 5 ride modes, radar-based sensors, and touchscreens that go dark in the sun. What they wanted was connection, the visceral kind. The vibration through the handlebars, the mechanical growl when twisting the throttle. That's the soul of riding. And the soul, it got smothered in silicon. Worse, these innovations didn't come cheap. With every update came a steeper price tag and higher repair bills. Sensors fail, screens crack, and when things go wrong, you can't fix them in your garage. You need diagnostic software, proprietary tools, or worse, a trip back to the dealer you already don't trust. Older riders look at these new bikes and feel pushed out. These machines weren't built for them. They were built for imaginary tech-loving Gen Z buyers who, it turns out, aren't lining up either. And now, something bizarre is happening. Motorcycles are overbuilt, overpriced, and under-desired. But there was still one thing left that buyers did trust: the used market gold rush. That's the question fueling the biggest shift in motorcycling since the early 2000s. As new bike prices shot through the roof and tech became overwhelming, riders started looking back to used bikes. And what they found changed the entire market. Unlike cars, motorcycles tend to age gracefully. A 10-year-old bike with 10,000 miles? That's barely broken in. And more often than not, these used bikes are garage-kept, meticulously maintained and already upgraded. Better suspension, louder pipes, custom seats. In many cases, you're getting a better version of the bike than the manufacturer ever built, and for half the price. Buyers are voting with their wallets. They're choosing simplicity, reliability, and performance they can understand and repair. No software updates, no touchscreen glitches, just a key, a throttle, and a wide-open road. In fact, some of the most desirable used bikes are from a generation when motorcycles hit the perfect balance. Electronic fuel injection, bulletproof engines, and no gimmicks. Dealerships saw the shift happening but couldn't stop it. Their new inventory sat untouched while private sellers cleaned house. Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, local classifieds. These platforms became the new dealership floor. And there's no markup, no fees, no pressure. Buyers realize something fundamental. They don't need a brand new bike to feel brand new. They just need one that rides well and doesn't bankrupt them. And what did this do to the dealers? It crushed them. Dealerships, drowning in unsold inventory. The same bikes that sold overnight now sit untouched for months. Showroom lights reflect off rows of chrome and plastic. Bikes that were once impossible to get now collect dust and silence. Dealerships are drowning in unsold inventory, and they're panicking. During the post-pandemic boom, dealers ordered aggressively. They bet big on the idea that demand would keep soaring, but they misread the market. As prices climbed and tech became more bloated, buyers pulled back. And when they did, showrooms filled up fast. Inventory overflow isn't just a visual problem, it's a financial time bomb. Most dealerships don't own the bikes on their floor outright. They finance them through floor plan loans from manufacturers or banks. That means every unsold bike is costing them money. Interest accrues, storage eats resources, the pressure builds. Behind closed doors, dealership managers are sweating. Some have slashed staff, others are consolidating locations. A few are quietly trying to unload stock at wholesale prices to rental fleets or overseas distributors. The desperation is real, but it's what came next that truly revealed how far they were willing to go. With no buyers and no solutions, they got desperate. The Desperation Playbook. New dealer tactics. Dealerships that once bathed in the profits of markups and financing traps are now scrambling, but they haven't admitted defeat. Instead, they've opened a new playbook, a darker, more desperate one designed to look like salvation. In reality, it's more manipulation. It starts with fake discounts. The MSRP inflated beyond reason. Then a sale gets applied, bringing the price down just slightly, but still thousands above the real market value. Buyers are told it's a steal. In truth, it's the same scam, rebranded. Then come the deceptive loans. Dealers lure customers in with talk of low monthly payments, but those payments are stretched across 6 or even 7 years with massive interest. On paper, it feels manageable. In practice, it's a financial trap. A $20,000 bike balloons into a $35,000 burden, all because the payment was pitched as just $300 a month. But the worst tactic? Scarcity theater. Dealers tell buyers the model is in short supply, that this is the last one, that 5 people are already interested. In reality, it's been sitting in the back for months. And if the buyer walks, another one won't magically appear, but the lie keeps working. The truth is, even as the floor collapses beneath them, dealers haven't learned. They're still trying to win with the same tricks that broke trust in the first place. And if you think the dealers were the worst part, wait until you see what's coming from the top. The manufacturer's shell game. For years, motorcycle buyers assumed manufacturers and dealerships were separate forces, one producing the bikes, the other just selling them. But behind closed doors, the line blurred. Brands like Harley-Davidson, BMW, and even Honda weren't just aware of dealer price gouging. In many cases, they encouraged it. What started as damage control during the pandemic morphed into a full-blown pricing strategy. And it worked. Until it didn't. It began with supply chain disruptions. Manufacturers reduced output, citing chip shortages and global instability. That part was true, but what followed was calculated. Brands quietly raised the manufacturer's suggested retail price. Then they leaned on dealerships to accept fewer units with higher margins. Bikes that should have retailed for $15,000 were now suggested at $18,000, and dealers tacked on even more. Harley-Davidson was among the worst offenders. As the brand's core buyer base aged and sales slowed, the company leaned into exclusivity, propping up prices to maintain prestige. At the same time, they throttled supply and let dealerships slap on market adjustments without pushback. BMW followed a similar playbook, especially with their adventure and touring bikes, where demand surged and supply lagged. Buyers found themselves paying $2,000 to $5,000 over sticker, even on mid-range models. And Honda, while traditionally the brand of the people, even they weren't immune. Dealerships across the country began listing popular models like the Rebel and Africa Twin for inflated prices. Honda's corporate offices said nothing because high dealer profits meant more orders, and more orders meant better optics for the brand's financial health. The result? MSRP became a mirage. The manufacturer's suggestion was no longer a ceiling, it was the floor, and every new shipment came with built-in assumptions. You, the buyer, will pay more, because if you don't, someone else will. Or so they thought. But even as the factory floor kept spinning, the buyers were disappearing. The aging rider crisis. The motorcycle boom of the 1980s and 90s was powered by one unstoppable force: the baby boomers. These were the men and women who saw Harleys in Easy Rider, who idolized fast bikes and open roads. For decades, they were the lifeblood of the industry. They bought bikes, customized them, toured with them, and passed them down. But now that generation is aging out, and fast. Many riders over 60 are hanging up their helmets, not out of lack of interest, but necessity. Physical limitations, health concerns, and economic priorities are shifting. The risks are higher. The recovery times are longer. The thrill hasn't vanished, but the ability to chase it has. And here's the terrifying part. Gen Z and millennials aren't stepping in to fill the gap. The reasons are complex, but the outcome is simple. Motorcycle culture, once a multi-generational pipeline, has stalled. Younger riders face higher debt, skyrocketing rent, and tighter urban living, all of which make motorcycling less practical. Add in the fact that many grew up in ride-share cities and eco-conscious suburbs, and the emotional draw of the open road just isn't there. This wasn't just a demographic shift, it was a market shock, and the industry had no answer. Instead of adapting, the major brands panicked. They introduced flashier bikes with tech-forward gimmicks, thinking that would pull in new buyers. But those buyers weren't even looking. The brands misunderstood the problem. They thought the younger generation needed more features. In reality, they needed more reasons. And the brand's answer? Not innovation, desperation. Who are these bikes? Even four. Walk into a modern dealership and the confusion hits you immediately. Massive bikes loaded with touchscreens, ride modes, and adaptive suspension systems, each with a price tag north of $25,000. These aren't motorcycles for first-time riders. They're machines aimed at a demographic that's either aged out or never arrived. Manufacturers are chasing a phantom audience. Young, wealthy, tech-savvy riders who want luxury on two wheels. But that rider doesn't exist in numbers big enough to sustain an industry. The real riders, those passionate about riding as a lifestyle, can't afford these bikes. And the ones who can, they're usually not interested. Even worse, the designs have become tone-deaf. Take a look at the latest urban motorcycles targeted at Gen Z. They're wrapped in edgy marketing, splashed with neon paint, and loaded with digital dashboards, but they cost more than a down payment on a house. Who is this really for? Meanwhile, electric motorcycles have entered the chat, but in the clumsiest way possible. Brands like Livewire, Zero, and even Harley's Pan America attempt to position electric riding as the future. And sure, that future may come, but the present? It's full of riders who can't charge at home, can't afford $30,000, and don't want a silent bike that doesn't rumble. The disconnect runs deeper than just pricing. It's cultural. Riders don't see themselves in the ads anymore. The lifestyle being sold feels corporate, distant, and curated. The tribalism, the loyalty, the late nights spent wrenching in the garage, that's gone. In its place, finance plans and influencer campaigns, and in the background, something irreversible was already underway. The end of motorcycle dealerships? As motorcycle dealerships face unsold inventory, trust erosion, and buyer defiance, a new model is quietly emerging, one that cuts the dealership out entirely. Direct to consumer. Tesla did it with cars, Rivian is doing it with trucks, and now motorcycle manufacturers are starting to ask, why do we need dealers at all? Harley-Davidson has already begun testing online sales, letting buyers configure bikes digitally and pick them up from distribution hubs. BMW has followed suit in Europe, offering fixed price orders with doorstep delivery. It's not widespread yet, but it's coming. The benefits are obvious. No haggling, no hidden fees, no sleazy upsells. You pay what you see, and the brand controls the experience from start to finish. For younger riders raised on Amazon and DoorDash, this is how shopping works. Why should bikes be any different? Dealerships, of course, are panicking. Many are already under financial pressure. If manufacturers embrace direct sales at scale, thousands of local dealers could shut down. The entire infrastructure, showrooms, staff, service centers could collapse. And while that might seem dramatic, remember, it already happened in other industries. But even if the brands fix pricing, even if they cut out the middleman and make the buying process transparent, there's still one brutal question hanging in the air. Will anyone still be left to ride? Because if the industry doesn't fix its bikes, its culture, and its soul, the problem won't be who sells the motorcycles. It'll be that no one's buying them at all. The future riders never asked for. That's the question echoing across dealerships, forums, and riding groups as the motorcycle industry barrels into a future its own customers never asked for. The electric vehicle transition was sold as progress, clean, quiet, efficient, but the reality has been anything but inspiring. Today's electric motorcycles come with price tags north of $25,000, ranges that barely scratch 100 miles, and charging infrastructure that is practically non-existent in rural areas, where so many riders actually live and ride. These bikes might suit an urban test track, but for the weekend tourer crossing state lines or the daily commuter with no access to fast charging, they're not a solution, they're a compromise. A compromise that riders never agreed to. And it gets worse. It's not just about electricity, it's about emotion. Riders have long said the same thing. They want the rumble, the gears, the sensation of the road running through a machine that breathes and roars. EV bikes, for all their torque and tech, can feel cold, soulless, like a screen between you and the street. The alienation is now complete. Loyal gas-powered riders feel abandoned. Curious newcomers are priced out, and even those willing to give EVs a shot are being let down by range anxiety, charging gaps, and sky-high costs. It's not that electric motorcycles are inherently bad, it's that they were rushed into an ecosystem that wasn't ready and priced like luxury art pieces instead of tools for the road. And as the industry pivots, so do the people. Will motorcycles become a luxury hobby? It wasn't always this way. For decades, motorcycles were the affordable freedom machine. Whether it was a Honda CB from the 70s or a Harley in the early 2000s, bikes were attainable. They weren't status symbols, they were escape vehicles for everyday people. But now, that's fading fast. Affordable models are disappearing from catalogs. Major manufacturers have quietly killed off sub-$10,000 bikes, opting instead to load every new release with tech-heavy features and premium pricing. What used to be a solid $5,000 starter bike is now a niche $12,000 machine packed with electronics most riders didn't ask for and can't afford to fix. Riding is becoming a rich man's game, and the fallout is already visible. Motorcycle clubs that once packed bars and back roads are thinning out. The distinguished gentleman's ride might make headlines, but local garage nights? Quiet. Young riders, especially millennials and Gen Z, are choosing not to enter the scene at all. Not because they don't love riding, but because the price of entry keeps climbing while wages and savings don't. And if you think this only affects who can afford a bike, think again. It's reshaping the entire culture. Fewer young riders means fewer mechanics, fewer custom builders, fewer shops willing to cater to grassroots bikers. It's a feedback loop that ends with motorcycling becoming less community and more showroom decor. And the collapse isn't just financial, it's cultural. The riders who refuse to be fooled. When the industry tried to push riders into overpriced, overcomplicated, and soulless bikes, something unexpected happened. Riders started pushing back. Hard. And they didn't just complain, they organized, they adapted. The used market surged as thousands of riders realized they could get more machine for half the price, without the dealership headaches. Independent wrenchers and small shops began booming, offering honest repairs and real advice. Forums came back to life. YouTube exploded with DIY tutorials and buying guides. The gatekeepers were gone, and the riders took control. Even more disruptive, the rise of peer-to-peer motorcycle sales and direct buy platforms. times. Riders realized they didn't need dealerships to find the right bike. They needed transparency, trust, and people who actually ride. That shift has created a new underground economy, one that bypasses the very institutions that created the current crisis. And with it came a new rider ethos: self-sufficiency, skepticism, and clarity. No more blind loyalty. No more dealer markups. No more buying into hype. This new wave of riders is leaner, smarter, and more connected. They value quality over branding. They care more about function than flash. It's a movement that doesn't want to save the industry. It wants to rebuild it on its own terms. But if motorcycling survives, it won't look the same. Can the industry be saved? The road isn't dead, but it's emptying fast. What happens next depends entirely on what the manufacturers do now, because riders have made it clear they're not going to play the old game. Not anymore. If the industry wants to avoid collapse, it needs to change everything. Affordability must return. Entry-level bikes should not cost more than used cars. Riders need models that are accessible, not aspirational. Simplicity must be embraced. Too many bikes are overloaded with electronics that break, confuse, and alienate. Give riders something they